From the Living Bread Radio Network and Look Up Here Productions, this is Open Your Hymnal, the show that explores the most beloved, enduring, and consequential songs we sing at Mass. Here are your hosts, Matt Reichert and Zach Stachowski.
Welcome back, Open Your Hymnal listeners. I am Zach Stachowski.
And I'm Matt Reichert.
And I'm excited about our episode today with John Angotti. I think it's a good continuation of some of the threads concerning contemporary music that we started with Steve Angrisano's episode last week.
Yeah, I agree. It's fortuitous that we have these guys back to back. And for anyone listening to today's episode, if you weren't able to catch our conversation with Steve Angrisano about his song, My Soul is Thirsting, you can always listen to that episode in its entirety on our website, openyourhymnal.com.
I read a book called This Is Your Brain on Music, and in one of the articles, I know I'm not going to get this exactly right, but basically the author says that your musical taste is defined by about the time you turn 20. And when I look at myself, that is exactly right. Like, even now, like if I do hear a new song that I like, it's because it sounded like something from 1998 that I loved. And so, I suppose that's why I Send You Out is going to be the first quote-unquote contemporary song that we do, because I guess it came out when, oh my gosh, when I was 15.
Yeah, well, no, I think that's an interesting point that you raise, the research about when our music preferences are formed, because I think, as we'll discuss in the episode, there's a lot of difficulty even in defining what we mean by contemporary and how we all approach contemporary music. And certainly the connection between a time in a person's life and what they relate to what was contemporary at that time certainly seems to have something to do with it. So we'll scratch the surface of contemporary music. We'll talk a lot about music discipleship, what it means to send and form people, and a little bit about culture wars, which we've got a full plate for today's conversation.
You really should be the one who says it, because I said it, I think, the last couple.
I said it the last couple. All right, so please open your hymnal to I Send You Out.
I send you out, I send you out, on a mission of love. I send you out, I send you out.
Hey, this is John Angotti, and I'm a music missionary that travels around the country, and I'm also a full-time music director and liturgist at St. Philip's in Franklin, Tennessee.
Know that I am with you always, until the end of the world.
The idea came in the late 90s, and sitting at a piano in Morgantown, West Virginia, and it is Pentecost Sunday, and I'm trying to find something that would be uplifting. I had a contemporary ensemble of about 40 in the group, and basically playing in a rock band on the weekends. I was working for West Virginia University Foundation, and Hootie and the Blowfish had a big hit at that time. And for some reason, the opening riff resembles one of their songs, just in the beginning riff. And so having that message at the end of that gospel, which is, and I'll be with you always until the end of time. And it just kind of sang. And so the hook is just like it's got that repetitive. I send you out on a mission of love. I send you out on a mission of love. So it became so simple, and it caught on instantly. I mean, like the little alto part that goes with it. My friend Meredith, who sang on the original recording and stuff, she just immediately picked that up. So sometimes, I think when songs are right, they just automatically sing themselves. And, so this one seemed to catch on. Of course, originally I wrote it in the wrong key. I wrote it in B flat like an idiot because, you think everybody's a tenor. And so, it's something that also resembles our baptismal promises. I baptize you in the name of the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit. And the second verse comes out with, it's time for us. You know, it sends us on this mission, which to me, I think a lot of people miss the sending forth, right? It's a misunderstood, you know, for people, you know, Mass ends whenever they think it ends. And one time I asked somebody, I said, why do you leave Mass early? And they looked at me and they said, you know, I don't know. And that hit me that's the real reason. You know, people really don't know that we need to be sent out on this mission of to love and to serve the Lord, because we can get confused in our occupations and our vocations. That occupations change, but our vocation is actually, we all have the same vocation that's given to us at the end of Mass, to go forth, to love. You know, you're losing your way along, what do I need to do? Love somebody, you know. And so I came up with this thing, what mission stands for, moving in spirit, seeing inside others' needs. And so the song's kind of had a little life of its own over the last almost 20 years now. It's kind of, which for some folks it's a new song, and but you know, it's been around a long time, so it's done. I think it helps to write. It helps the people, you know, take what just happened to them. You know, you just received the body and blood of Christ, and now go out and be that. And so, you know, connects things with the world and all that kind of stuff. So.
Before we get too far into our conversation, Zach, I think we should take some time to define our terms. We're going to be using the term contemporary at different points in this conversation, and that's a word that, depending on the hearer, is going to mean different things. Some people feel contemporary means, you know, in the moment or of the time. Some people feel that it's a style. I certainly know people who will refer to the music of, you know, David Haas or Marty Haugen or the St. Louis Jesuits as contemporary liturgical music, and I also know people who think of the music of those composers as traditional because they've grown up with it and it's been around for a while. So for the purposes of our conversation, how do you think we ought to frame our understanding of this label contemporary?
I think it's a good question because, you know, we often think of the word contemporary as something to do with chronology. So, you know, music of the time, perhaps. And it's important to note that I Send You Out is actually nearly 20 years old. So by that definition, it would be hard to qualify this song as being contemporary. So I think for the purposes of liturgical music, the word contemporary tends to have more of a qualitative definition. But I think what you say about, you know, what's contemporary for some is traditional for others is the really important or really interesting thing here. And if we're thinking of contemporary as music of the time, what we're really saying is that it's music of the time where people, I think, were maybe coming of age. So like those people who think of David Haas and Marty Haugen as contemporary are the same people who are growing up or listening to the music of John Denver, perhaps, where you can see a lot of correlation between those kind of styles. The music now, where, you know, top 40 is heavily influenced by rock, pop music, the things that we're hearing when you go to the grocery store. I think it's when people hear music that sounds like that, that we tend to throw around this this designation of contemporary.
Yeah, and I think that stylistic qualification is interesting because one of the, and we'll get to this in our conversation with John, but one of the things that we talked about, and I think one of the considerations for a lot of people who are planning music when they consider styles and they consider contemporary music is, what is the role of contemporary music, or how ought we to approach or think of contemporary music in terms of the liturgy? And certainly that's a big conversation, and there are a lot of ways to think about it and a lot of considerations. But I think if we approach it from the standpoint of how is our prayer life and our worship, you know, this synthesis of faith and life and culture, and how do those things interrelate? I think that maybe helps to frame some of these questions of, is contemporary music appropriate for the liturgy or not? If so, why? How should we, you know, meet people where they are in terms of the music they listen to, culture, etc.?
these days when I'm writing for liturgy, I think differently than when I originally started writing, because when I started doing this, and then people started saying, "Hey, can you come to my parish? Can you come to my?" And I realized I didn't know anything. So I went on to get a master's in pastoral studies at Catholic Theological Union in Chicago. And that whole experience opened my eyes to, like, nobody knows this. No wonder nobody's singing. You know, people are not predisposed before they enter into the worship. You know, you can't technically go to Mass to get faith. You go because you have it. And so when is it nourished? And it's like nobody's really feeding their faith. And so therefore they're coming on Sunday because they're hungry. And so now we have this beautiful liturgy that nobody speaks the language. So the music is catechetical because it helps people enter into the ritual, you know. And sometimes, you know, we don't realize, because one of the things I find is time is a man-made entity. So when you enter into outside of the earth, there is no time, earthly time. And when we enter into Mass, it's like entering into this different time zone. But the only way to do that is to use your imagination, which is also not enough. But I think we've lost a sense of, I don't know if this is the right word, but mythology and mystery, you know, to enter into something that is actually present, but we just, you know, you have to leave your own consciousness and enter into a different realm. And, you know, how do we do that and help people enter in? You know, that's why, you know, you see churches that are now have narthexes and pathways where people walk into their so they can, it's like, you know, you're transforming, coming into this whole other thing, but it's like a movie, you know. But who's thinking that? You know, who has that intentional idea when they're walking in? So then you can, you know, you meet God first in each other, where I confess to you, Almighty God, and my brothers and sisters, I screwed up this week. Lord, have mercy. You know, but so I don't think we have. I think presiders need to have a sense of that as well. Musicians need to have a sense of that. So it's not just one style. You know, that the style wars, some people are, you know, they're kind of stuck in their own head and they can't see. You know, for me, I think it's chant, it's contemporary. You know, you can't forget where you came from, because I think some of those old chants help us tie into something that's before us, that still continues. And yet the contemporary stuff gives us a pathway to where we're going, so you don't get stuck and you can still reach a new generation. So what's music like in heaven? And so I tell those that are stuck in the contemporary world, the first thing you're going to hear is you know, Latin chant. And those that are stuck in Latin chant, first thing you're going to hear is those African drums. You know, they're like, what's this? You know, so because at the end of the day, I mean, really, it's a big guess. You know, we don't know, and people want to have security to say, I'm right, this is the way, I have all the answers, and this is the way it should be. And it's like, you know, we're still evolving.
So can I be a devil's advocate for a second? So let me pose this. So let's pretend that you're my music minister and I'm your pastor, right? And what response would you have to a question of, I understand that people's connection and relationship to music in a contemporary or modern style. However, the problem is that there is music in the same style that is popular and of the culture, that refers to a lot of activities, topics, etc., that is not appropriate for church. And so therefore, when you bring in that style to a worship setting, there isn't the same type of reverence or quality or depth that is required for something, especially like the Eucharist, right? So in in some ways, that argument uses exactly what you're talking about, meeting people where they are and saying, but where people are outside of church is not where we want them to be inside a church. So how do you square that circle when presented with that question?
Well, I guess this is the crux of the whole style wars debate about what is beautiful, what is appropriate, what is reverential. And I don't know, but I think what Father Jim Martin said in our special feature episode that we recently released about anything that brings people closer to God is okay, to paraphrase what he says. Now, of course, that opens wide the door, because what is going to bring me closer to God is not necessarily what's going to bring my grandmother closer to God, which is not necessarily what is going to bring the guy down the street closer to God. I think what we miss in the whole style wars debate is an authentic conversation with each other about, why does this music speak to me? What am I getting from it? Instead of, unfortunately, what we usually do, which is a knee-jerk reaction to say, oh, no, that doesn't belong here. Of course, there are very technical ways of discerning, looking at lyrics to make sure that they are theologically correct, that they are not heretical in any way. Sing to the Lord and the other music documents, they only give us vague words of which to make these determinations. Things like saying that the music should not be trite. Again, how do we do it prayerfully? And to me, it means a real authentic relationship with your assembly, with your pastor, with your staff, knowing what speaks. Is this the kind of message we want to bring? Is it doing it effectively? Is it bringing people closer to God? Is it reverential of God? And I think perhaps we need to be okay with the answer to those questions being different depending on where you are.
Yeah, no, I think there's a lot there that is absolutely correct, and I think it underscores, first of all, that besides musical, we have two other judgments, right, to be able to use. And so we're not just looking at something based upon its style and preferring it or not preferring it. We also, in addition to that, need to look at things theologically. We need to look at things liturgically. So, I mean, we do have multiple points of reference here when making those decisions. But I think what you're saying, Zach, and you're right to refer to what Jim Martin said too, in that we need to understand the close personal relationship and experience that people have with the prayers that they pray, the music that they sing, and the experience of common communal worship. And we need to form that, and we can't replicate that inauthentically. I think sometimes what gets in the way, regardless of whatever style we're talking about, whether it's contemporary or it's hymnody or it's chant or whatever it is when we foist a style upon people because we assume it's best, or we assume that's what they want or that's what they need, and there isn't that other formational personal connection aspect. I think, my hypothetical question of, well, this isn't reverential, it's too of the culture and not enough, of God. I think that can be true. And I think that can be true for any style if there's not that catechetical underpinning, and we can't talk about the formational aspect of that piece and how it connects, and people really understand what we're singing and why we're singing. If we program I Send You Out just because it's got drums and electric guitars, and we think that's what the kids are going to want, or boy, people are really going to come to Mass if they have exciting music, it's a problem. Just like if we only plan chant or organ music or guitar music from the 60s or whatever because we feel like that's what people are really going to want and that's what's going to pack them in the seats, etc., then we really have a problem. And I think we always have to drill down to that formational level and meet people there where they are, because that's where we're going to find out what it is that they need.
Know that I am with you always until the end of the world.
Because here's the thing. Full active and conscious participation, which is what we're looking for. How do you get that? I found the only way to get full active conscious participation in Mass is people have to have full active and conscious participation in life. If you're not in a relationship with Christ in your everyday life, if you don't have a prayer life, if you're not conscious of God in your moments of traffic or anger or that kind of stuff, if you don't have that kind of, if you don't have that type of intentionality in your life, it's hard to come to Mass and then all of a sudden say, please rise and join in our celebration, and have full active and conscious participation, and you don't even know who you're worshiping, because, you know, if you truly believe Christ present, how can you not sing? So there's something about believing, and to be able to believe that at Mass, you have to, you know, Mass is the response to faith, right? So how is your faith nourished, and all that kind of stuff.
Well, it seems to me like what we're talking about or talking around here is this whole concept of hospitality, right? And so, you know, if you think through the lens of hospitality when you're welcoming people, how do you do that to meet them where they're at, wherever they are, and to move them down the field a little bit, to feel more comfortable, to engage differently, to be open, etc. So when you think about how we do that culturally in our homes, whether we do that well culturally or not, applying that in a liturgical or a ministerial setting, not only do we have to be hospitable in terms of welcoming people, but then we need to be hospitable so they're prepared to be formed, and then we need to send them. And that's one of the things where I think this song gets a lot of its impact and a lot of its power, is because it is a song about sending, but it's about the go and do. It's the missioning piece. And so, you know, thinking again about our previous part of this conversation about the connection between faith and culture, you know, vis-a-vis style of music. If we think about culturally, how do we welcome people into our homes? You know, you have people over for dinner and you welcome them, you know, then we can form them for great conversation, etc. And we don't send them. I mean, maybe, you know, maybe if people overstay their welcome, we have to, but there's no like, we haven't gathered them to send them for some sort of purpose, right? But that's exactly why we gather for prayer and for liturgy, is to be formed so that we can be sent out of the doors. I think of that Pope Francis quote, you know, that Christ knocks on our hearts to be let in, and on the doors of the church to be let out. Right. So this piece is all about sending out. And I think we as a church do a good job of gathering, a pretty good job of gathering. We don't always do a great job of sending. And so I think this piece in particular really underscores that. And it's no wonder then that it becomes popular, you know, especially for, of course, Pentecost, but also for commencement season, for graduations, for missioning masses, that type of thing, where it really underscores the going and sending. But ultimately, that's what we do every time we gather for worship.
Absolutely, because it is when we are sent forth from the liturgy that the really hard work begins. And the song speaks to that, and it's a hard thing to do, to live the gospel in our lives outside the walls of the church. There's something easier about it when you're gathered there on a Sunday for an hour. You know, you're with people that you know, but going out and then living that gospel call in the grocery store, at work, where there are people who believe different things than you, that's the real challenge. And so I think you're right, Matt. We need to do a better job of sending.
You know, we're all evangelists. Church exists to evangelize. And so the way that I evangelize is through the music. So the music speaks and spreads the gospel, and that becomes the mission to go out into the world and to bring this good news. So the music mission part is using music as the tool to bring the mission to the world, you know. And it's not my mission, it's Jesus' mission, you know, who says go forth and baptize all and bring the gospel, you know, and as best as you can. So a lot of people don't hear it, don't want to hear it. So I think you have to kind of be creative and and how we present this. So music has an opportunity to bring a message and bring what you feel God is telling you to tell other people in a unique way. So some of the music I write is liturgical, and some of the music I write is not liturgical. It's more inspirational, and you know, as church continues to struggle. I was just in Tampa last week, and they did this logistics survey in the area in downtown Tampa. And I don't know how many hundreds of thousands of people it was, but anyway, 12% were Catholic, 11% were Protestant, and 60% didn't even believe in God. So, you know, I think it's the church has an opportunity here to rethink itself, to renew itself, you know, and ritual is a language that we speak, and if people don't understand the language, how can they enter into the encounter? And, you know, I think we've lost a sense of mystery, and we don't live in that era anymore where people are with this awe and wonder. You can turn to your phone and find all the answers, and so I had a friend of mine who's a millennial kid. He played for this group, Gungor, who's a big Christian group, and he left them because he said, you know, the Christian market's a lot about money and selling CDs and creating an experience for folks to do what became the question, you know. And so he doesn't play with them anymore. And he says to me, he says, why do I need your church? He says, I got a group of friends. We believe in God. We pray together. We go out and do works of mercy together. And you know, in some ways I was like, I couldn't really answer the question. And because I think, you know, to look at ourselves as musicians and what we do as church, to say, okay, are we making a difference? So, you know, these days I look as a liturgical musician to say, is the world different? Did what we sing and what we presented allow people to enter into this communication with God? Because that's what ritual is. You know, it's not about the ritual. Too many people get too worried about how many candles they got on the altar. And that doesn't matter. You know, if what we do doesn't lead to something, and if we're not listening, and if it doesn't lead to the mission, you can cut this out right here. What the hell are we doing? Right. What are we doing? You know, and because I don't think that how many masses we do, or the proper way we do it, or what, all this other kind of stuff, I don't think God cares. I think God cares that we listen to God speaking to us through the Word, through the sacraments, and going out and doing these works and trying to do the best we can to be followers of Jesus.
And I think this is a key reminder for those of us who are in pastoral ministry, because when we plan liturgies and we think about liturgies, oftentimes we focus primarily on the gathering, the forming, the what do we do during this hour. And that's exactly right. And I'm not disparaging that whatsoever. That, you know, I spend so much time thinking about where is my community at? How am I going to start to form them? How am I going to welcome them? How am I picking pieces through a pastoral lens that they know, or they can learn, etc. For during that time? How do I form them so they're ready for worship within that time? And then by the time we get to the final song, or the sending forth hymn, I mean, it's kind of the piece that, okay, yep, ties everything together, and now we're going to go out and stuff, and we'll see you next week. And I start thinking again about gathering. But, you know, I think what John offers in his conversation and his witness is thinking about ourselves as music missionaries. Now John refers to himself as a music missionary in a different sense, because he does exactly that. I mean, he travels around and he gives concerts and presentations, and certainly not every parish or school of music minister is called to do that, right? But we all are music missionaries in the sense that, of course, our job first is to help people pray, be leaders of prayer, ministers of prayer during this time. But we also need to think about, how do we affect people's understanding, information, and experience of what to do when they leave those doors. Again, Christ knocking on the doors to be let out as we send people forward. I think that's really important. And as John says, we're disciples first and musicians second. Not that, if we think of that not in the framework of music style or anything else like that, but as that is a question to evaluate. How are the liturgies we are planning? How are the experiences we are preparing for? How is the prayer we are, putting on the lips of people? How is that helping them for the time immediately after they leave our worship space, after they leave our liturgies? That starts to change our frame of reference a little bit. And I think that's exactly what we're called to do. And that's really where liturgy as the primary moment of catechesis can become ultimately formative, when it's not just about the hour or so that we are together, but it's about the rest of the week. And I challenge myself in my capacity as a music minister to keep that more in front of my face all the time. And it's a hard thing to do because there are so many things that demand your time and attention, but that's really what it's all about. That is how we are called to be music missionaries.
God, it's a terrifying thing to think about, because it's easy to think about whether people like singing the song that you picked. It's easy to think about whether you did a good job rehearsing the choir or not. But to think about whether the music you've picked and the way you've executed your ministry has actually transformed the way that people live their lives outside of the church doors, it's a terrifying thought to reflect on. Because first, that's the true evaluation. And second, if it's not transformative, the work that it would take to get there could potentially just be incredible. I think so often churches will do evaluations about liturgy, like send out parishioners questionnaires like, how do you like the music? How do you like the homilies? The real question should be in these evaluations: how has the way that we celebrated liturgy transformed the way that you live your lives when you are not at liturgy? I don't see that question asked enough, and I think that goes hand in hand with the fact that we don't think about the sending part as much. This also has implications for when we, as music ministers, are trying to persuade our assemblies to sing. So often we look at it as a one-dimensional, we need to teach the assembly these songs, they should sing because it's good to participate in the Mass. More so than that, if we're truly selecting music in this way, with the hopes of transformation, we should be encouraging people to sing and to participate in Mass, because it will change your life if you truly allow these words to resonate on your lips and in your hearts.
Well, and this is where, again, for a third time, to go back to this relationship between what we do in our culture and what we do in our faith or in our worship, is the reality that when I stand in the assembly, in my community, in my church, and I sing these words, I am making a declaration. I am taking these words and I am making them my own, and I am proclaiming them, right? It's just like standing up and saying the creed. A lot of people don't have the formation to understand really what we're doing, but I think if people understood, when you stand up in front of your community and before God and you declare these words, I believe, that's not nothing, right? That's really something incredible. The same thing for the words that we sing. Now, when you put that in the context of what we do in our culture, we sing in our cars and along with the radio and all this stuff all kinds of time. And you really want to think sometimes about the songs that we sing along to, or the words that we sing along to. Is this really what we believe? Are we standing by this? Are we committed to this? And so that's a different expectation and a different reality of what participation means in a liturgical setting as opposed to what it means in the culture. Think about some of the pop songs that you sing along to, are those things that you're committing to and making your own? Probably not. But that is what happens when we're at liturgy.
Or at least what we hope happens.
Exactly right. Or at least what we hope happens. And so how do we make that switch between, yeah, I know in the car on the way over to Mass today, you were singing, I'm not even going to make a pop culture reference because all of my pop culture references are too old. But, think about the songs you're singing along to on the way to Mass and your relationship to how you believe those words. And now you come to Mass and we expect that you do believe those words. That's a whole different catechetical problem to try and wrap our arms around.
As a composer, I did my whole thesis project on the journey of a song. And so it was taking the different rites of the Mass and looking at what it's asking for. Like, each rite has a mission of its own to accomplish a certain task as people journey through the liturgy. And I call them hops of faith, where you can take a hop of faith to recognize Christ in each other, to take that to be humble enough to now recognize Christ present in the Word, God speaking to us. So now you have that second part, to take that bigger hop or that leap of faith to now recognize Christ present in the Eucharist. Because, man, I'm telling you, that is the kicker that boggles the mind, that people, they don't get it. And so if you don't believe it, it's not going to it's not that it's not what it is, but the effect that it has is not going to be as great. If you're a musician or something and you don't believe it, you're not going to be a musician. So what I try to, especially when I go out and do missions, because this has happened for me, is that if you give it a maybe, I think God can work with our maybes. But if you say no, you shut it down. But maybe I can plant and till the soil and work with that maybe. And over time, when you start to believe that, and then all of a sudden when you leave Mass, you do say, you know what, I'm not going to scream at that person coming out of the parking lot or whatever, because then it changes our responses. We have to bring something to the table. And if we don't bring our faith to say, I don't get it, I don't understand it, but I'm looking at the lives of the saints. I'm looking at the church exists even in its dysfunction. I look at Jesus Christ who lived, died, and rose from the dead, or else we wouldn't be here today. Okay, God, maybe. That might start people to have a deeper appreciation that, okay, you may not understand all the Mass, but why should I come to church? Because we got the Eucharist. And to me, that means something, because it has affected my life. And I want other people to be able to appreciate that too. In some ways, if anything, it makes us nicer. Makes us kinder. And if it doesn't do that, then we maybe miss the point of what it's supposed to do, to become that Christ. And when you look at Jesus and, okay, what was his mission? He was on the outside. The mission isn't inside the church. The mission's outside the church. And so that's, for me, that's the purpose of writing liturgical music is, in the beginning, when I first started writing, it was like, you have all these things in your head about a music career because that's what you want to do. But I'm 50. I'm on the back half of things. And I want to leave the world better than I found it. So that when I meet God face to face, you hand him the tapestry of your life, and you're like, here's my artwork, and I try to do what you asked me to do. And that's why I write.
And now, here is a recording of I Send You Out in its entirety.
I baptize you in the name of the Father. I baptize you in the name of the Son. I baptize you with the Holy Spirit. Go out and spread good news. I send you out. I send you out on a mission of love. I send you out. I send you out on a mission of love. I send you out. I send you out on a mission of love. And know that I am with you always until the end of the world.
Now we'll be right back after a word from our sponsors.
We want to make sure all of our listeners know about the One Call Institute. One Call is a summer program dedicated to the engagement, empowerment, and ongoing support of young musicians and adults in ministry who work with young people. Our summer program is a 6-day intensive institute designed to provide opportunities for participants to grow musically, theologically, spiritually, and communally. This year, our team will include renowned composers and leaders like Father Ray East, John Angotti, Rory Cooney, Lisa Anslinger, Andre Haywood, Craig Colson, Zach Stahowski, Kate Williams, Matt Reichert, Maureen Briard, Bonnie Faber, and more. Come learn, sing, and pray with musicians and leaders from across the country and beyond. For more details, visit onecallinstitute.org. Welcome back, everyone. It is now time for the Open Your Hymnal playlist. This is the part of our show where Zach and I get to play for you additional songs that we select based upon something from our conversation. So, Zach, why don't you begin with your 2 picks?
Yeah, so of course, one of the main threads that we discussed with John was this idea of sending. So I wanted to throw another sending song into the mix. And this one comes to us from Tony Alonso from the album Christ Be Near that he made with Marty Haugen and Michael Jonkis. It's called God Sends Us Forth, and it reflects on all the things that we did during Mass and what that's going to mean as we leave the doors of the church. So this is God Sends Us Forth.
God sends us forth to love and serve, make known God's name and live God's word. Mirror God's love, reflect God's grace, till all have seen the Savior's face. Nourished by Christ with word and bread, burning with love and spirit.
So what's your second pick?
So I found something that I think hits a couple of touchstones. Of course, John mentioned his work with Meredith Augustine, and she can be heard singing on that recording of I Send You Out we heard. And so I found something off of her album Boundless Mercy. It's a cover that she did in collaboration with John of one of my all-time favorite choral pieces. It's a song by Michael Ward called In the Breaking of the Bread. I think probably at some point we're going to have an actual episode on this song. I hope we do. But it's one of my favorites, and I think it's a great example of contemporary music artists kind of reaching across the aisle, bringing something that maybe contemporary audiences might not be familiar with, and being able to introduce them to it. So this is Meredith Augustine and John Angotti singing In the Breaking of the Bread by Michael Ward.
In the walking on the road, we saw him. In the telling of our hopes, we saw him. In the burning of our hearts, we saw the Lord. At the meal he took the bread, and then he blessed it, broke it, offered him. In the breaking of the bread, we saw him. Suddenly our eyes were open, and we knew he was alive. We set out to find his friends, to tell them, everyone that we could meet, to tell them. And with joy we told them, we have seen the Lord. And as we were speaking there, he stood among us, blessed us, said to us, now my peace I leave with you. We saw him. Suddenly our eyes were opened, and we knew he was alive. Then we became afraid without him. In the darkened room we stayed without him, waiting for the one he said that he would send. Oh, then the Spirit of the Lord came down upon us, filling us, changing us, giving us the strength to say we saw him. Suddenly our eyes were open, and we knew he was alive.
So there are my two picks. Matt, what do you have for us?
Well, I tried to pick songs that would do double or triple duty. So my first pick is a song written by the composer Tom Franzak, and it is a piece that is called The Call. And the reason I chose it is because Tom is really one of the sort of pioneers of the type of contemporary music missionary that John Angotti is. He really kind of helped lay some of this groundwork for people like John to continue the work that he does. I chose it also because, like you've said in the past, Zach, the church does a good job emphasizing our sending sometimes, especially for young people. But sometimes we don't do enough, or as much as we could, to emphasize the call that we receive. And so certainly, as the name would suggest, this is a piece about the call. And third, I just love Tom Franzak. And I think he's such a deep, beautiful spirit, and that really comes through in his music, and I really wanted to share a piece with all of you. So this is Tom Franzak's song, The Call.
Father, you knew me before my mother's womb, but what you're asking seems way too much too soon. I'm not a teacher or a speaker, I'm much too young and full of fear. But still you say you'll speak through me in spite of my young years. Wherever you send me, I will go. Send me, Lord, send me, Lord. Whatever you tell me, I will speak. Send me, Lord, send me, Lord. Cleanse my heart and soul, wash away my fear. Place your words in my mouth and deliver me. Deliver me. Wherever you send me, I will go. Send me, Lord, send me, Lord. Whatever you tell me, I will speak. Send me, Lord, send me, Lord, send me, Lord, send me,
I decided to also go to this, treasury of hymnody that we have to highlight another use of a text similar to John's I Send You Out, but now with a traditional, again, hymn. So this is the hymn tune Sine Nomine, and this is a text from the text writer Sylvia Dunstan, and this is the hymn Go to the World. Thank you for listening to Open Your Hymnal, and special thanks to John Angotti for speaking with us. I Send You Out is published by World Library Publications. The recording you heard was released by World Library Publications on the album Rise Up, My People.
Links to these songs for listening and purchasing and additional resources can be found at our website, openyourhymnal.com. Production assistance and support for this episode was provided by World Library Publications.
Be sure to follow Open Your Hymnal on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. And if you haven't yet, you can subscribe to the podcast through iTunes and Google Play.
For Open Your Hymnal, I'm Zach Stachowski.
And I'm Matt Reichert.
Thanks for listening.
You've been listening to Open Your Hymnal. All content of this episode is property of Look Up Here Productions or its content suppliers and is protected by United States and international copyright law. For more information about this show and its use, please visit openyourhymnal.com.